Hey guys, in today's video I'm going to be going over how we can create the save screen and the account screen for our application. And this is what the end product will look like. So without further ado, let's get started in creating these screens. So let's start off with our imports. So import view, style sheet, and flat list from React Native, button and text from UI Kitten, use state from React, and Lottie view from Lottie-React-Native. And for our local imports, import row from components/row, theme from our theme file, properties, card, and our property type here. And down at the bottom here, let's create our styles variable. And we're going to assign a new style to our screen here. So let's create that. We'll just call it screen and give it the property of margin horizontal and set that to 10. And let's assign that here. Style equals styles dot screen. Now let's get rid of this text here and replace it with our row component. And we need to give our row its own styles. Within the row are going to be buttons, so I'm going to call it button container and give it the properties of align items to center and border radius of 5. Container. And now within our row, let's create those buttons. So the first is going to be labeled favorite, and we just need to pass in small to the size prop and then create a duplicate of that button, but we're going to give it a name of contacted, and same thing but just applications for the bottom button. So we need to change the styles of the button a bit, so let's create a new style down here called button. And we're going to give it the properties of width of 33.3%, border radius of 0, and border color is going to be our color-primary 500. And then each button needs its own individual styles as well. So application button is going to have the properties of border top right radius 5 and border bottom right radius of 5. Favorites button is going to have a border top left radius of 5 and border bottom left radius of 5. And then our contacted button is going to have a border left width of 0 and border right width of 0. So now let's assign those styles to these buttons. Okay, that's looking pretty good now. We just need to change the colors so that only one is active. So to do that, let's create a new state variable called activeIndex to represent the active button. And beneath of that, let's create a new function. We're going to call it getButtonAppearance, and it's going to take in an index. And then we're going to say if the active index is equal to the passed in button index, return filled. Otherwise, we'll return ghost. And then for each button here, for the appearance prop, we need to pass in the getButtonAppearance function. And then we'll pass in a number as well. So because favorites is the first, I'm just going to pass in 0. And then for contacted, it's going to be a 1. And then applications, we're going to pass in 2 here. Okay, so that's looking nice now, but we just need to add some functionality so that whenever we click on one of these buttons, it gets filled. So to do that, it'll be really easy. We just need to create a function here called handleButtonPress and pass in an index, and then set the active index to this passed in number. And then for each of our buttons, we need to handle the onPress event. So here for our first one, we'll just call handleButtonPress and pass in 0. For the second, we'll do the same, just passing in 1. And then for applications, we'll do the same, just passing in 2. Now, depending on the active index, we want to display a different thing on the main section of the screen. So if we're saying applications here, we want to have something correlated to applications. Or favorites means that we need to either display some text saying that they don't have any favorites or a list of properties which they've favorited. So let's get into that right now. The first thing I suggest doing is going to lottiefiles.com and picking out 3 different Lotties that may pertain to favorites, contacted, and applications. I've already done this and added them to my assets here. I named them applications.json, contacted, and favorites, but you can name them whatever you want. So I'm going to be using those whenever there are no properties associated with the favorites, contacted, or applications. And then I'm going to create a new function here called getBody, and we're going to check for the active index number. So if active index equals 0, we need to return something unique here. If it's equal to 1, we need to return something unique. And then at the end, by default, it will be 2. So here we need to return something unique as well. So for index 0 here, I'm going to return a Lottie view, and we're going to set autoplay to true. And the source for this is going to be my favorites.json file within my Lotties folder. And then I need to add a style here called Lottie, so I'm going to add that real quickly. And the styles for Lottie are a height of 180, a width of 180, margin bottom of 20, and align self to center. Now underneath of our row here, we need to create a view. So we'll do that. And then within this view, we need to call getBody. So with that done, let's add some styles to our view here. We'll just call the view container. So we'll say style equals styles.container. And then down here, we can put it right underneath our buttons. And container is going to have a property of flex, which is 1, and then justify content, which will be center. Alright, so that places our Lottie in the center of the screen. And if we press on different buttons, nothing's getting returned yet. So let's finish out this current component by adding some text underneath. And for that, I'm going to create a new function called getBodyText, and it's going to have 2 parameters as taking in. One's going to be a heading, which is a string, and then the second will be a subheading, which is also a string. And within this function, we're going to return a view, and within that view, we're going to return some text. The category is H6, and the style we need to create later, but it's going to be called text. Also to mention, the view is going to have a style of text container, which we also have to create. And then underneath of that, we'll create our other text component, which will display our subheading. The appearance is going to be hint, and then this is going to get its own special style, which will be called subheading. So this is what will be returned from getBodyText. Let's just add the styles, and then we can add it here underneath our Lottie view. Now underneath Lottie here, I'm going to create those styles above, like right here. So text is going to have the property of text aligned to center. Subheading will have a property of margin top equal to 10, and then text container will have margin vertical of 15. Now underneath our Lottie view here in getBody, I'm going to call getBodyText and pass in you don't have any favorites saved, and then tap the heart icon on rentals to add favorites. So that will now display some text underneath, and that's looking pretty good. Now if the user is not signed in, we want to display a pair of buttons here underneath the body text, and the first button is going to be a sign in button, and then the one beneath that will say create account. So let's create a new component which will show those 2 buttons. And I'm just going to head to components here and create a new file called SignUp and SignInButtons.tsx. Now for this, we are going to import view, style sheet, and view style from React Native, and then button from UIKitten, and we'll also import our theme. And then we want to export our component here, which will take in an optional style prop. And beneath that, let's create our styles. Now within our component here, we just want to return a view, and we're going to pass in the style that gets passed into the component. And within this view, there needs to be 2 buttons. So the first one will be a sign in button, and we're going to have to change this later so that we can actually navigate to the sign in screen. It's just that this screen hasn't been created yet, so we can't do that. And then for the second button, we just need to give it an appearance of ghost and then create some styles for it. And those styles are going to be a margin vertical of 10 and a border color of color-primary 500. Now back in our saved screen file, we can create a new variable called user. So we'll just say const user equals undefined for right now. And we're only using this variable to build out the UI. Go back to get body, and we'll say if no user, and then we want to return sign up and sign in buttons. And let's create a style for these buttons. I'm going to call it sign in and sign up button container and give it a margin top of 15. So let's add that style here, styles dot sign up and sign in button container. Alright, so that's what we want to return if there are no properties that the user has liked. But if there are properties the user has liked, we'd want to return a flat list of those properties. So let's do that here. And first we need to create a new variable called liked properties. So const liked properties, and we can assign it to properties. And here within our if statement, we'll say if active index is 0, and then if liked properties, then we need to return something different. And then we also need to add some brackets here. So for liked properties, we'll just create a new function to get a flat list of passed in properties. So let's do that here. It's going to be called get properties flat list. It will take in a property array and it will return a flat list. We'll set shows vertical scroll indicator to false. Data will be equal to properties. Style will have a margin top of 10. Render item is going to be a card. The property is going to be the passed in item. And then we need to create a style called card. And then the key extractor is going to be the item.id. And then we have to convert that to a string. So let's create this card style and then see how it looks. And that card style is just going to have a margin horizontal of 0 and then a margin vertical of 5. And then back here in get body, we'll just say returned get properties flat list and then pass in liked properties. And there you go. You can see the liked properties now. And in future versions, the heart will actually be filled in. We just haven't implemented that functionality yet. All right, and then let's test out one other option here so that user is true, but there are no liked properties. So let's go back here, set properties or liked properties to undefined again. And then for user, just set it to anything non-falsy. I'm just setting it to true, and there you go. The buttons are no longer showing because the user is signed in, and those buttons being the sign in and sign up button. But let's set this back to false for now. And pretty much we just need to create two other variables called contacted properties and application properties. And then we'll follow some similar logic here. It's just that the Lottie view is going to be different, and the text as well. So here where it says if active index is equal to 1, let's wrap this in brackets. And then we'll say if contacted properties, we just want to return the flat list of those contacted properties. Otherwise, we would like to return a Lottie view just with a different Lottie. And then get body text, I'm going to pass in you have not contacted any properties yet, and the subheading is going to be your contacted properties will show here. And then beneath that we'll do the same logic for the sign in and sign up buttons. So now we can save that and check it out. Alright, that's looking pretty good. So let's do the same thing for applications. And here outside of this if statement, I'm going to close this up real quick. We're going to say if application properties exist, then we need to return that flat list for the application properties. Otherwise, we would like to return a Lottie just with the applications Lottie now. And underneath that, we'll get the body text stating check the status of your rental applications here. Any properties that you have applied to will show here, and then also that user logic. All right, so let's check out that. And that's looking good as well. So with those done, let's test out the contacted properties and application properties just to make sure it's all working. So we'll set this to properties and go back to contacted properties, and there you go, it's showing. We'll set that back to undefined and then do the same thing here. Set it to properties, go to applications. Okay, so those are all working. Let's set them all to properties now. Properties. And there you go, it's working for all of the tabs now. So I'm going to set those back to undefined. And now we can get started on building out the account screen. So for the account screen, we need to add some new imports. The first one being scroll view, view, and style sheet from React Native, use navigation from React Navigation, and text and button from UI Kitten. And then in addition to screen, we need to import sign up and sign in buttons and theme. Now underneath of our component, let's just create our styles. And let's get rid of this text here and display a scroll view. And we need to give that scroll view a style. I'm going to call it container, and the flex is going to be 1. So let's assign that. Equals styles.container. And then within the scroll view, we'll display a view here. And this view will have a margin horizontal, so let's create that style. Call it default margin horizontal. And assign it here. Now depending on if the user is signed in or not, we need to display different things. So let's create a variable here called user and set it to undefined. And let's also create our navigation variable. And then here within our view, we'll say if a user exists, we'll display something, otherwise we'll display something else. So if a user does exist, we would like to display some text. The top text component will just say welcome and then the user's first name. I'm just putting this in for placeholder at the moment. And then underneath that, we just need to display the email of the user. And for this first text, it's going to have a category of H4. Second is going to have category of H6. And they're going to have unique styles, which we need to create. So username is going to have the properties text align to center, font weight to 600, margin bottom of 5, and then text transform to capitalize. And email is going to have text align to center as well, font weight of 500, and margin bottom of 20. And let's see what it looks like if the user is set to true. So it's displaying, it's working. But now let's focus on the else statement here if the user is not signed in. Now, if the user is not signed in, we would like to display some text saying renting has never been easier. The category is going to be H5, and then it's going to have its own unique style, which we will create in a moment. And then underneath of that text, we'll have the sign up and sign in buttons. A view will be underneath of that, and it will have its own unique style. And within that view, we'll be displaying some more text saying, are you a property owner or a manager? The category for that text is going to be S1, and we're going to give that its own unique style as well. And then underneath of that, we'll display some more text saying, visit our website to access our full suite of rental management tools and start receiving applications in minutes. So that's pretty much what we are going to be displaying. We just need to create some styles to make these look pretty. So for header, it's going to have text align to center, margin vertical of 25, margin horizontal of 70, and a font weight of 600. Middle container is going to have justify content to center, align items to center, padding top of 30, padding bottom of 50. The border top color is going to be our color dash gray, and border top width will be 2. Subheader will have a text align of center and padding horizontal of 20. And body text will have margin top of 10, text align to center, and margin horizontal of 15. Now underneath of this, we would like to display some buttons in a list. So let's create a new component called ButtonList. ButtonList.tsx. And the imports for this are going to be pressable, style sheet, view, and view style from React Native, text from UI Kitten, and then our theme. And then we want to export our component. It will have the props of data, header, style, border top, and margin top. Data will be an array of objects, which will all have the properties of label and onPress. And header is an optional prop, which could be a string. Style, optional prop, which will be view style or view style array. Border top, optional boolean, and then margin top is an optional boolean as well. Now underneath of this, let's create our styles. And here in ButtonList, let's return a view. That view is going to have some styles. So we need to create a style called container. Then we'll pass in the style getting passed into the button list. And then for border top width, we'll say if border top is being passed in, then it's going to be 1, otherwise it will be 0. So for the style of container here, it will have the properties of border color equal to our color dash gray, and then border bottom width will be 1. And now let's create a function for getting the header here. It's going to be called getListHeader component. And then if no header is passed in, then we'll just return null. Otherwise, we'll return a view. And within that view, we'll return a text component, which will have the header. So for the styles on the view, we need to create the header container. And then we'll say if margin top is being passed in, we'd like it to be 35. Otherwise, it will be 0. So the style for header container is going to have a padding vertical of 12, background color of this hex code, border bottom width of 1, and then border bottom color of color dash gray. And header text will have a font weight of 600 and margin left of 18. And then here in our view, we'll just call getListHeader component as the first thing. So underneath of this, we'd like to map through our data, and for each item, we're going to be returning a pressable component. And within the pressable component, we're going to be returning some text, which is just the item.label. The key for the pressable component will just be the label as well. OnPress will be equal to item.onPress. Now let's create another style here called option, and it's going to have the properties of padding vertical 12 and padding horizontal of 18. And then for the style here on the pressable component, we're going to create an array. Index 0 will be styles.option, and then the background color will depend on whether or not the option is being pressed. So if it's pressed, then it needs to have the background color of color dash gray from our theme. Otherwise, it will have the background color of F2, F2, F2. And if it's not the last item in the array, we'd also like to include the container style for the pressable component. And then at the end here, we're just going to return the array. So with that done, let's go back to our account screen. All right, so now let's create the underlying data for our button lists. So first we'll create an array here called first signed out buttons. It's going to have an object with label of add a property, and then onPress will be a function just logging something to the console. Same thing, just with view properties. And then underneath that, we'll create another array called support buttons. We'll have the label of help center, and then a label of terms and conditions. Underneath that, we'll have renting buttons. So we'll say favorite properties, and then here we will actually navigate to our root and then our saved screen. And then we'll have rental applications and my residences and rent payments. Underneath that, we'll have account buttons, account settings, billing history, banks and cards. Underneath that, we'll have rental management buttons, which will be add a property and add apartment to a property. And then view my properties. So underneath of this top level view, we'll do another check to see if the user is logged in or not. And if the user is logged in, then we'd like to return a button list here. And let's import that. Import button list. And we're going to have the data equal to renting buttons, and the header will be renting made easy. Underneath that will be a button list with the data being account buttons, and then the header will say my account. That will be followed by rental management buttons with the header of rental manager tools, and that will be followed by support buttons with a header of support. And underneath that, we'll return a view with two styles. We just need to create this one. And special margin vertical will be down at the bottom here. It'll have a margin top of 30 and margin bottom of 20. And within this view, we'll return a button which has the appearance of ghost, and on press we'll just log out the user, and it will have the text of sign out. And let's add these styles real quickly. And button will have margin bottom of 15 and border color of color-primary 500. Now if the user is not signed in, we'll return a button list as well. It will have the data of first signed out buttons and border top. And underneath that, we'll return another button list called support buttons. The header will be support, and there will be a margin top. And beneath that, we'll return some brand text. So let's create that style right now. And all that we really need to do is say text align to center. So let's do that for brand text. And there you go. It's looking a lot better. So this is what it looks like if the user is not signed in. But if they are signed in, let's check out what it will look like. So here we'll say user is true. And this is what it will look like for them. And we can actually test this out by going to favorite properties, and there we go. We're on favorite properties. So that is it. That is the creation of the saved screen and the account screen. I hope that you found it useful, and thank you very much for watching.